Before a man's love could save me, my father's words first had to break me. I was just a child when I made that promise in front of everyone. Standing there, surrounded by the familiar faces of family and churchgoers, I blurted out something I hadn't fully understood. A dream of marriage, of love, of a future, the kind of future no one had ever told me I deserved. But in the blink of an eye, my father's laughter rang out, louder than the words of the preacher. "She'll never be good enough for that," he scoffed. And just like that, my innocence was shattered. From that moment, I wasn't the little girl with big dreams. I was the leftover daughter, too stubborn, too clumsy, not worthy of what I wanted most. I was never the picture of what they called proper. My sisters knew how to sew, to smile with grace, to fit into the mold. I didn't. I was the wild one, the troublemaker. But deep inside something stirred. I didn't know then what it was, but it kept me going. This is the true story of how I rose from the ashes of rejection, fought against the weight of doubt, and claimed the love and life I was told I could never have. There were days I felt I would never escape the shadow of those words. She's not good enough. But those same words that were meant to destroy me, they forged me. They pushed me to prove them all wrong, because I wasn't the failure they believed me to be. I still remember that moment like it was yesterday, the day my childhood promise became my battle cry. And even though I was laughed at, mocked, and rejected by the very people who should have lifted me up, I never let go of what I believed was my destiny. You see, the love I thought would save me was never the love I needed. It was my own strength, born from every single word that tried to break me, that would one day pull me from the darkness. This is the journey of a woman who wasn't supposed to have a happy ending, but she fought, through the pain, through the doubt, through the betrayals, and she won. Not just the love of her life, but a life of her own. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever felt the weight of rejection but kept fighting anyway, then this story is for you. Comment strength below if you've ever had to fight for your dreams. And if you believe, just like I did, that your worth isn't defined by the doubts of others. Now, let me tell you what happens when you refuse to accept that fate is something you're forced to live with. I was only 11 years old when I made that promise, standing in the middle of the congregation, the sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows. It was a day like any other, until I saw him. Walter. A man who carried the kind of quiet strength I had never seen before. His deep-set eyes told stories of a life lived with purpose, a life beyond my little world. He was older, far older than me, and I didn't understand much about love then, but I knew in that moment that I was meant to be with him. I had no words for it, just a simple thought. One day, I will marry him. I opened my mouth without thinking, loud enough for everyone to hear. When I grow up, I'm going to be Mr. Walter's wife. The laughter hit me like a sudden gust of wind, cold and sharp. My father, standing just a few feet away, laughed harder than anyone. He threw his head back and waved his hand dismissively, as if the very idea of it was absurd. "This girl is really crazy," he scoffed. "Walter, did you hear that? Patricia wants to marry you when she grows up." Walter looked down at me, a small smile playing on his lips, but there was no laughter in his eyes. "That's good to know, Miss Patricia," he said softly, tapping his chest. "I'll keep that right here." The others laughed even harder, but I didn't mind. For some reason I didn't feel foolish. I felt seen. Walter didn't mock me. He didn't join in with the others. His smile was warm, genuine, and that moment, however brief, meant more to me than anything else in the world. As we walked home that day, I could hear my father still chuckling, recounting the scene to my mother. "Can you believe it, woman? Patricia said she's going to marry Walter. A grown man. Look at her! She's just a little girl." The words stung, but I didn't show it. I was already lost in my own thoughts. thinking about how Walter had looked at me with kindness, not ridicule. My promise felt real to me, even if no one else took it seriously. That night, as my mother stirred the pot of sweet tea in the kitchen, she called me over to sit next to her. Her voice was low, almost sad. "Patricia, listen to me carefully, honey. Marriage is not a game. It's not something little girls dream about. It's serious. It's hard work. It's about obeying your husband, having children, cleaning the house, going through life's hardships together. If you can't get married, stay single. Marriage? It's no good, honey. It's just suffering." Her words sank into me like stones. My mother's eyes were tired, as though the weight of life had settled permanently on her shoulders. I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but I felt the sadness in her words. I didn't know it at the time, but her voice, full of bitter experience, would follow me for years to come. I didn't know how to respond. How could I? She was my mother. I didn't want to hurt her, but the thought of giving up on the promise I had made to myself and to Walter felt like betrayal. But her warning stayed with me. I began to doubt, not my promise, but myself. I wasn't like my sisters. They were graceful and quiet. They knew how to cook, how to sew, how to smile demurely when suitors came calling. I was the opposite of everything they valued. I was stubborn, loud, clumsy. And worst of all, I was different. "Patricia, you'll never marry," my father said, as if the words were a truth he had already accepted. I had heard him say it countless times before, always with a sigh, always with that knowing look in his eyes. "You're too much of a handful. Too troublesome." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. It was easier than fighting against the truth he was imposing on me. But there was another part, a small, quiet voice inside me that kept whispering, "You will be more than they think." Her innocence was crushed. But that very promise would change everything. It wasn't just the weight of my father's words or my mother's warnings that held me down. It was the overwhelming weight of expectations. Expectations I didn't fit. Expectations that labeled me as unworthy. My sisters were perfect. They were everything I was not. They cooked, they cleaned, they were poised, soft-spoken, and beautiful in ways I could never match. Savannah had golden hair that gleamed like the sun, always neat and tidy. Charlotte walked as if she were floating, and Grace had the most beautiful green eyes that made her seem like a goddess. And then there was me. "Patricia, stop climbing those trees," my father would scold. "Why can't you be more like your sisters?" I didn't know how. I didn't know how to be quiet, how to sit still, how to be what they wanted, and the harder I tried to fit in, the more I felt like I was failing. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a version of myself that didn't belong. Too thin, too loud, too clumsy. My father's harsh words echoed in my mind. "You're not good enough. You'll never marry. You'll always be the one left behind." And yet, something inside me refused to believe him. Even when he laughed at my dreams, even when my mother told me not to bother, there was a flicker of hope I couldn't extinguish. I still held on to that promise. That one, innocent promise made to Walter, the man who had smiled at me that day and said he would keep my words in his heart. No one believed it would happen. But as I grew, so did the fire inside me. I wasn't going to let their words define me. I wasn't going to let my father's cruel dismissals shape my future. There was more to me than what they saw. There was more to me than what they wanted me to be. And one day, I would prove them all wrong. As the years passed, the laughter faded, but the sting of my father's words never did. They clung to me, heavy like the thick southern air, suffocating any dream I tried to hold on to. The more I grew, the more I realized how little room there was for someone like me. It wasn't just the laughter anymore. It was the way my father's eyes always looked past me, as though I weren't even there. How he would beam with pride when he spoke of my sisters. But when he looked at me, his eyes softened only in disappointment. My sisters, who seemed to fit perfectly into the roles society demanded of women, graceful, obedient, beautiful, were constantly held up as examples of what a proper young woman should be. They were his pride, his legacy. They would marry, well, have children, and take care of everything that needed to be taken care of. And then there was me, the odd one, the one who never quite fit. "Patricia, stop climbing those trees," my father would scold, his voice sharp, as if the very act of me daring to enjoy myself was some great offense. "You're too old for that. Why can't you be more like your sisters?" My heart would sink every time, but I never showed it. Instead, I climbed higher, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could get far enough away from the sharp sting of his words. It was as if being on top of a tree was the only place I could breathe freely. But as I grew older, I began to notice something in the way my father looked at me, the way he spoke about me to others. His tone was always different when he talked about my sisters. When he spoke of Savannah, he would say, "She's got the poise to catch a good man. She'll be a fine wife." When he spoke of Charlotte, it was, "She's the kind of woman any man would be proud to have at his side." And then, when he spoke of me, the words came out as if he were resigned to something he couldn't change. "Patricia?" He'd chuckle darkly. "Well, she's different. I wouldn't count on her ever getting married. Too stubborn. Too much trouble. The world wasn't kind to me. I wasn't beautiful like Savannah, with her golden hair that caught the sunlight just so. I wasn't delicate and dainty like Charlotte, who could make every movement seem like a ballet. And I wasn't quiet like Grace, who always had the perfect thing to say in every conversation. I wasn't any of those things. I was just me. Too loud. Too awkward. Too different. I started to believe them. I spent hours in front of the mirror, tracing the lines of my face. I would look at my messy hair and my gangly frame and try to imagine myself as one of the proper girls in the world. Graceful, neat, composed. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fit that mold. I wasn't like them. I was never going to be like them. I was the one who didn't get asked out, the one who never seemed to get picked for anything important. I was always the odd one out. And I was beginning to feel like that oddness was a curse I'd never be able to escape. Every day, I heard my father's words in my mind. "She's not good enough. She's too stubborn. She'll never marry." And the worst part? I believed him. I believed that the way I was, the way I always had been, was never going to be enough. I wasn't the daughter they wanted, the one who would get married and carry on the family name with pride. I was a failure before I even had a chance to prove otherwise. My mother's voice did nothing to lift me. In fact, it only added to the weight on my chest. She would talk about how marriage was hard, how it wasn't what I imagined it to be. Her eyes, tired and worn, spoke of a life that had beaten her down. "Marriage isn't all it's cracked up to be, Patricia," she would say, her voice heavy with the burden of her own experience. "It's not all love and happiness. It's about sacrifice. It's about obedience. It's about doing what's expected of you, even when you don't want to. Don't get your hopes up, honey. If you can stay single, stay single. Marriage is nothing but trouble." Her words echoed in my mind for years. She wasn't wrong, but what hurt was that she believed marriage, love, was only for people who were proper, people who were perfect in every way. She had long since given up on those dreams. resigned to a life of quiet suffering. I didn't want that for myself. But if love wasn't for people like me, what was left? I started to wonder if the promise I had made to Walter all those years ago, made so innocently without knowing what love truly was just a fantasy, a silly childhood dream. No one believed it would happen. They laughed at me, ridiculed me, and eventually, I stopped speaking about it. My promise was just one more thing to mock, one more thing to hold up as evidence that I was different. But even with all of that, even with the constant rejection from my family, there was a small part of me that refused to give up. I kept holding on to that promise, that flicker of hope that had survived everything else. Because deep inside, I knew I wasn't as they said. I wasn't just a mistake waiting to be erased. There was more to me. And maybe, just maybe, Walter had seen it too. But what if all the pain I endured, every word, every rejection, every doubt, would prepare me for a fight I couldn't yet see? I wasn't sure, but I could feel it, deep in my bones, like the quiet before a storm. Something was coming, and I had no idea how much it would change my life. As I stepped further into my own life, I found that the closer I got to my dreams, the more fiercely my family fought to pull me back. For years I had been pushed into the background, ignored, rejected, but now there was a part of me that couldn't be silenced. I had a promise to keep, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my father, stand in my way. Yet the closer I came to pursuing that promise, the heavier the weight of my family's disapproval became. It started small, like a whisper in the wind. My father would glance at me with that same dismissive look, the one that said I was a lost cause. But as my resolve grew stronger, so did his anger. The more I pursued my own path, the more he doubled down on his rejection. "You think you're going to change your life, don't you?" he would mutter under his breath. "But you'll always be the same stubborn, troublesome girl. You're nothing like your sisters, nothing like anyone who's worth anything." I heard those words more often than I cared to count, and each time they cut deeper. His voice, once just a passing irritation, became an anchor, dragging me down, reminding me that no matter how hard I tried, I would never measure up to what he wanted. But despite all of that, something inside me held on. Every time he belittled me, every time he dismissed me, I thought about Walter. I thought about how, in his eyes, I wasn't a problem to be fixed. I wasn't a burden. I was a person worthy of love and respect, even if no one else seemed to think so. One afternoon, after I had been out for a walk, trying to clear my mind, I returned home to find my father talking to some neighbors, Mrs. Peterson and her daughter Jessica. They were sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea, gossiping about the latest happenings in town. But when they saw me, the conversation stopped. I could feel their eyes on me, heavy and judgmental. "Oh, look at her," Mrs. Peterson said, loud enough for me to hear. "Too wild, too head in the clouds, and certainly not marriage material. I don't know what Mr. Robert thinks letting her act like that. She'll be nothing but trouble for any man who tries to settle down with her." Her words stung, more than I wanted to admit, but it wasn't just the gossip that hurt. It was that feeling of being a spectacle, the object of ridicule for people who thought they knew me. It felt like the entire town had a say in my life, and none of it was positive. I stood frozen on the porch, my father's silence ringing in my ears. He didn't speak up. He didn't defend me. In fact, I could see the faintest smirk on his face, the one that told me he agreed with everything Mrs. Peterson had said. I was nothing to him, just a disappointment, a child who didn't know her place. The evening passed quietly, the tension thick in the air. I couldn't even eat my dinner properly. Every bite felt like it was stuck in my throat, suffocating me. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I could hear my father's voice filtering through the walls. He was speaking to my mother, discussing my wild behavior. "Patricia doesn't listen to a word I say," he complained. "She's going to ruin everything. She's already caused enough trouble around here. If she thinks Walter's going to come along and change things for her, she's sorely mistaken." "I know, Robert," my mother replied, her voice weary. "But what can we do? She's grown now. She makes her own choices. Her choices will ruin us," he snapped. "She'll never be good enough for someone like Walter. She's not even good enough for herself." Those words felt like a slap to the face. I had tried so hard to prove them wrong, but every step I took toward my future felt like it was met with resistance. My father's rejection stung more than anything. It wasn't just his disapproval. It was the way he looked at me, as if I was destined to fail, as if my dreams were nothing but a joke. The next few days were filled with tension. The community gossip grew louder, more invasive. People started whispering behind my back, calling me the girl with her head in the clouds, or the dreamer who will never get anywhere. Every time I walked into town, I could feel the judgment. The looks that said I didn't belong, that I wasn't good enough. It was suffocating. I couldn't go anywhere without hearing their voices in my head. But it wasn't just the community. It was my family, too. They were a constant reminder of the life I was supposed to live. The life of a quiet, obedient woman who followed the rules and never rocked the boat. They didn't understand me, didn't see the woman I was trying to become. To them, I would always be the loud, stubborn girl with too many ideas and not enough sense. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the kitchen, my mother came in, her face tired, her eyes full of concern. "Patricia, you have to stop," she said, her voice low and pleading. "You're hurting yourself. You're fighting against something that's never going to change. You're not like your sisters. You'll never fit into the life you want. You need to accept that." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't understand," I whispered, choking on the tears I refused to let fall. "I can do this. I will do this." My mother just shook her head, her face full of sorrow. "You'll never be good enough. You'll never change. You can't fight what you are." The weight of her words almost crushed me, but I refused to let them. I refused to believe that my dreams were impossible, that I was destined to be the disappointment they all expected me to be. I went to my room that night, the thoughts swirling in my head. It was true, I was losing myself again. The weight of my family's rejection, the judgment of the community, it was all too much. It felt like I was being suffocated under their expectations. I could feel the pull of the past, dragging me back to the place I'd fought so hard to leave. But then, in the darkness of my room, something inside me shifted. For the first time in a long time, I thought about Walter. His words echoed in my mind. "Sometimes the ones who are different are the ones who surprise you the most." I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. I wasn't going to let their rejection stop me from chasing my dreams. I had a promise to keep, and if I was going to fight for it, I would do it with everything I had. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and stared at the girl who had spent so many years feeling like she wasn't enough. I saw her, the girl who had always been told she didn't belong, but I also saw someone stronger now, someone who could fight for herself. Her destiny was calling, and this time I was ready to answer. But would I have the courage to follow it? Or would the weight of my past crush me before I could even take a single step forward? The morning of the confrontation, I could feel it building inside me. This pressure, this anger, this desperate need to finally say what I had been holding in for years. I knew today would be different. Today I wasn't going to shrink back. Today I was going to stand tall and say everything I had kept silent for so long. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of my father's rejection, years of watching my family dismiss me, laugh at my dreams, belittle everything I was. My father's voice, with its constant criticisms, had become my inner voice, telling me I wasn't enough. But something had shifted. The words I had once absorbed so deeply, the hurt I had internalized for so long, they no longer had control over me. Walter's belief in me, his quiet, constant encouragement had awakened something in me that I thought I had lost forever. My own voice. And now, it was time to use it. It was late afternoon when I found the courage to confront my father. I had spent the morning alone, walking through the woods behind our house, collecting my thoughts. I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't let it go on any longer. When I stepped onto the porch, my father was sitting in his usual spot, smoking his hand-rolled cigarette, his eyes on the horizon. He didn't look at me when I came outside. He never did, not with any real attention. "Father," I said, my voice steady, but my heart pounding in my chest. "We need to talk." He didn't respond at first, but the slight tightening of his jaw told me he had heard me. His silence was always the same before he decided to shut me down. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to speak, but he didn't. I felt the anger rising in me, but I pushed it down. I wasn't here to yell. I was here to make him listen. "You've always told me I wasn't enough, that I'm too stubborn, too difficult, that I'll never be like the others. You've always told me I'll never get married, that no man will want me," I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. "But I'm done listening to that." He scoffed, shaking his head. "What's gotten into you, girl? You've always been this way, always fighting everything. You think you can just change your life by wishing for it? It doesn't work like that." His dismissiveness was a familiar sting, but this time I didn't flinch. This time I wasn't backing down. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, standing tall in front of him. "No, it doesn't work like that," I said, my voice hard with conviction. "But it works when you believe in yourself. And for once, I'm not going to let you define who I am anymore. I'm not the girl you think I am. I'm not the girl you've been telling me I'll always be." My father's face twisted with disbelief, and I saw a flash of anger in his eyes. "And what, you think someone like Walter is going to change everything? You think he's going to fix you? You're wrong. He's just like the rest of them, a man who'll look at you for a while and then move on when he sees what you really are." His words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let him see that it hurt. I didn't flinch. Instead, I held my ground, looking him in the eye. "You think Walter is going to leave me? You think I'm not worthy of love? I don't need someone to fix me, and I don't need pity. I need respect. I need to be loved for who I am, not for what you want me to be." He was quiet for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if trying to process what I was saying. But before he could speak, I pressed on. "I've spent my whole life trying to fit into your mold, trying to be what you wanted me to be. But I'm done with that. I'm not the daughter you hoped for, but I am the woman I've become. I'm proud of who I am, even if you can't see it." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I felt my chest tightening, but I kept breathing. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to let him see how deeply his words had hurt me for all these years. I had already cried too many times in silence. Finally, my father spoke, his voice cold and sharp. "You're making a mistake. I'm telling you, Walter's not the answer. You'll regret it." I shook my head. "No, I won't. I won't regret choosing to be myself, to finally live for me. I won't regret fighting for my own happiness, even if you don't understand it, because it's my life, not yours." I turned and started to walk away, but my father's voice stopped me. "Patricia," he called, and there was a tremor in his voice I hadn't heard before. "You're not what I wanted you to be, but you've got the strength to stand up to me. I'll give you that." For the first time I saw it, the faintest flicker of something in his eyes. Pride? Regret? I wasn't sure, but it didn't matter anymore. He had seen it. For the first time in my life, he had seen the strength I had inside me. I didn't wait for him to say more. I turned, walking toward the field where I had seen Walter a few days ago. I knew he'd be there. He always was, working, living his life the way he wanted to. I needed to see him, to feel that quiet belief in me again, the belief that was stronger than any rejection I had faced. When I saw him, my heart skipped. He was just finishing up, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat glistening on his forehead. His brown mare grazed peacefully by the fence as he wiped his brow. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. But then, before I could think, the words rushed out. I'm not going to be the girl they said I'd be. I'm going to fight for this, for us, for the life I've always dreamed of. I won't let anyone stop me, not even my father. Walter stepped toward me, his expression softening. I always knew you had it in you, Patricia, he said quietly. You've got the kind of strength that most people never even realize they have, and I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you want me to. For the first time, I realized something so simple, yet so powerful. I didn't need someone to save me. I didn't need someone to fix me. I just needed someone to see me for who I was and love me anyway. And Walter did that. He always had. I don't need anyone's permission to follow my heart, I whispered, finally feeling the weight of all my struggles begin to lift. I just need to believe in myself. Walter reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, his touch grounding me in this new truth. And you do, he said, his voice filled with pride. You always have. The days that followed my confrontation with my father were a whirlwind. The tension in our household remained thick, but there was a subtle change in the air. It was as if the very walls of our home had shifted, allowing a space for something new to emerge. I knew deep down, I wasn't the same person who had walked into that confrontation. The girl who had been lost in the shadows of her family's rejection was gone. And though I still had my doubts, still felt the weight of their disapproval, it didn't matter anymore. I was no longer going to let their voices dictate my worth. I was finally learning to listen to the only voice that truly mattered, my own. The community continued to gossip. People still whispered about Walter and me, about our growing relationship, about how strange it was that someone like him, respected and successful, would choose someone like me, the wild daughter, the head-in-the-clouds dreamer. They didn't understand us, but that was okay. It didn't matter anymore. Walter and I spent more time together, as our bond deepened in ways neither of us had expected. It wasn't just about the promise I had made when I was little. It was about a shared understanding, a mutual respect that we built each day. I had always thought love meant someone saving me, fixing me. But Walter showed me that love was about acceptance. True love wasn't about someone coming in and changing everything. It was about being seen and accepted for exactly who you were. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, I realized just how much I had changed, how much we had both changed. Walter's hand rested on mine, and as I looked at him, I could see the quiet pride in his eyes. It wasn't just about me being his dream girl. It was about how he had always seen something in me that I had failed to see myself. He had always believed in me, before I even believed in myself. I told you I'd fight for us, I said, my voice quiet but certain. Walter's smile was soft, his fingers tracing mine. You always had the strength to do it. You just needed to realize it. And in that moment, everything I had fought for, the rejection, the loneliness, the heartache, felt worth it. Because I wasn't fighting for anyone else's approval anymore. I was fighting for myself. I was fighting for the future I deserved. Days turned into weeks, and as our relationship grew, so did the whispers of the town. But the more they spoke, the more I found peace in my own skin. I wasn't the leftover daughter anymore. I wasn't the one who couldn't marry. I was someone who had chosen to fight for her dreams, regardless of the world's expectations. It wasn't just Walter who believed in me. I had finally learned to believe in myself. And then came the day when I stood in front of my family, not with the anger I had once felt, but with a quiet, unwavering strength. My father had seen the change in me, but I wasn't waiting for his approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to see me the way I had always hoped. I had come to understand that my worth wasn't tied to his acceptance. It wasn't even tied to Walter's love. It was mine to define. We sat at the dinner table, the air heavy as my father finally spoke. "So, you're really going through with this," he said, his voice steady, but I could hear the undercurrent of disbelief. "You're going to marry Walter." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't flinch. "Yes, I am," I said. "I'm going to marry Walter, not because I need saving, not because he feels sorry for me, but because he sees me, because he's the one person who has always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." My father was silent for a long time. His eyes shifted as if searching for something in me, but whatever it was he was looking for, I knew I had already given him the answer. "I still don't understand it," he muttered, shaking his head. I nodded, standing taller than I ever had before. "That's okay. You don't need to. But I'm not going to apologize for being who I am anymore. I'm not going to apologize for having dreams, for believing that I deserve love, respect, and a life of my own. I'm not the girl you thought I was, and I'm certainly not the one you tried to make me into. I'm me." For the first time in my life, my father looked at me not with disdain or disappointment, but with something else, perhaps a flicker of recognition. I couldn't say for sure, but it didn't matter. His approval no longer defined me. I had already found my peace. The wedding was a simple affair, but to me it was everything. I walked down the aisle, not with hesitation but with certainty. My father, who had once doubted me, stood beside me, and though his face was still full of that familiar skepticism, there was something different in the way he looked at me. It wasn't pride, not yet, but it was the acknowledgement that I had done something for myself. I had chosen the life I wanted, and no one else could take that from me. As I stood before Walter, I felt everything fall into place. For so long I had thought I was the broken one, the one who would never be chosen. But now, as I looked into Walter's eyes, I realized I had always been enough. I had always been worthy of love, of happiness, of everything I had ever dreamed of. And that dream wasn't just about finding a man who could love me. It was about finding the strength to love myself. For the first time, I understood the true meaning of love. It wasn't about someone fixing you or completing you. It was about sharing a life with someone who saw you for who you truly were, flaws, dreams, and all, and loved you anyway. Walter wasn't my savior. He was my equal, and together, we were building something real. As we stood there, hands intertwined, I realized that this moment wasn't just about love. It was about justice. It was about proving to myself that no matter how many times the world told me I wasn't enough, I was. I had fought for this life, this love, this future, and no one could take it from me. Walter's voice broke through my thoughts, soft but filled with conviction. "I'm proud of you, Patricia. I always have been." And in that moment, I knew everything had come full circle. The girl who had been told she was too wild, too stubborn, too different, had finally found the strength to stand up for herself. She had found the love she was always meant to have, but more importantly, she had found herself. And so, she finally learned that true love wasn't just about finding someone, it was about finding herself. If you believe in the power of dreams and the strength it takes to chase them, leave a heart in the comments below and hit subscribe to continue following this journey of empowerment and love. Looking back, I realized that everything in my life, every struggle, every rejection, every moment of doubt, led me here. The girl who once believed she wasn't enough, who thought her dreams were too big, too impossible, is now someone I'm proud to be. The promise I made when I was just a child, standing boldly in front of a crowd, seemed like a naive fantasy at the time. But as I stand here today, with Walter by my side, I see it for what it truly was. The beginning of my journey, not just towards love, but towards self-empowerment. That promise made in the innocence of youth carried me through years of pain, rejection, and self-doubt. It kept me going when the world told me I was too different, too stubborn, too much. But what I've learned, through it all, is that being too much isn't a flaw. It's a gift. And it took me far too long to understand that. For so long, I let others define me. I let my father's cruel words, my mother's resignation, and the judgment of the community become the loudest voices in my head. But eventually, I stopped listening to their opinions about who I was supposed to be. I stopped waiting for their approval. And for the first time, I began to live for myself. I found love, yes, but more than that, I found something far more powerful: the strength to live authentically. I realized that love, real love, doesn't come from someone saving you or fixing you. It comes from mutual respect, acceptance, and the willingness to stand side by side with someone who believes in you as much as you believe in yourself. Walter didn't fix me. He saw me for who I was, who I always was, and he loved me anyway. And I loved him. Not because he completed me, but because together we could create something real. The world may have laughed when I made that childhood promise, and they may still whisper about me, but I've learned to let them talk. Because I know who I am now. I know my worth, and no one, not even my own family, can take that away from me. I am not the leftover daughter. I am not the one who was too much to be loved. I am enough. I am more than enough. The little girl who once dreamed of marrying Walter didn't know the road would be so difficult. But what I realize now is that it was the struggle, the battles I fought along the way, that made the victory so much sweeter. And in the end, it wasn't just about a promise made in front of a church. It was about a promise to myself. The promise that no matter how many times life knocked me down, I would always get back up. That I would always keep fighting. That I would always believe in myself, even when no one else did. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever fought for your dreams or had to prove your worth to the world, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and let us know how you've overcome the odds and chased your own dreams. No matter where you are in your journey, your story matters. And sharing it might just inspire someone else to keep fighting too. This is just one story of overcoming the impossible, but there are many more journeys like this, waiting to be told. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. We've got so much more to share, stories of resilience, strength, and love. Stories of people like you, who refuse to give up. The next journey is just around the corner,